The countdown is on, or rather it's stalled again. After more than a decade of development and countless tests, the Dream Chaser from Sierra Space is still not on the launch pad, but in a holding pattern. But let's be honest, in the last 3 years, more has happened than in the years before. From successful electromagnetic interference tests to partnerships that could finally catapult the thing into orbit. Today we're going to unravel the story, take a look at what else Sierra Space is up to, and ask ourselves why it took so long. As optimistic as always, because in the end, this could be the game changer for commercial spaceflight. And the elephant in the room, does the Dream Chaser even stand a chance? Keep in mind that Starship will gain more and more capabilities in the coming years. My name is Servan and this is Mars Chronicles. Let's take off. Let's take a look at the progress of the last 3 years. And yes, there is progress, even if it feels like sprinting through syrup. In May 2023, Sierra Space pushed the crew variant of the Dream Chaser through the System Requirements Review, a milestone that shows the foundation for crewed flights is in place. But then the shift in focus. In June 2023, Sierra Space entered into a Space Act agreement with National Aeronautics and Space Administration to exchange data about the space station architecture. This indicates that they're not just focused on Dream Chasers, but are building a much larger ecosystem, similar to Blue Origin. In September of the same year, the major Series B financing round brought in $290 million, raising the company's valuation to $5.3 billion. Money that was invested not only in the spaceplane, but also in other projects. It became more interesting in 2024. In May, the first Dream Chaser Tenacity arrived at the Kennedy Space Center together with the Shooting Star cargo module. The tests began. In June, NASA officials inspected the duo in the Space Systems Processing Facility, and in July they celebrated the successful passive common berthing mechanism test. The thing that ensures Dream Chaser docks seamlessly with the International Space Station. In August, they tested the cargo module thrusters, and in December announced Tenacity will deliver 3.5 tons of cargo to the International Space Station. But then the delays. The launch was postponed from April to summer, then to the end of 2024, and currently, with the end of November 2025, it is scheduled for no earlier than the end of 2026 on a Vulcan Centaur. In addition, the mission will no longer dock with the International Space Station, reasons being certification hurdles, supply chain issues, and the shift to defense projects. Another 7 missions for National Aeronautics and Space Administration have been completely cancelled. I guess Dream Chaser is arriving too late to the party at the International Space Station, ISS. For the remaining 4 years, the use of Soyuz and Dragon is completely sufficient. And maybe a few Starliner missions if Starliner ever goes into full operation. In any case, the only other mission that is currently confirmed, even though no fixed date has been given yet. One where 35 payloads for the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs or United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs will be carried on a European Ariane 6. However, that doesn't mean that Dream Chaser's fate is now completely sealed. No, not at all. Currently, several companies are actively working on bringing commercial space stations into operation. These include Blue Origin's Orbital Reef, Vast's Haven, Axiom's Axiom Station, and Sierra Space. They are planning to launch their inflatable live stations into space. All of them need to be supplied with cargo and personnel, so the market is definitely there. However, how many of these stations will have a solid business model in the long run is another story. Now let's take a look at the specific development steps of the past few years. The X-feed from Sierra Space paints a similar picture of the developments. They posted photos of Tenacity's arrival in Florida, showed the completion of the environmental tests, and shared progress on finishing the second and third Shooting Star modules in their Dream Factory in Colorado. International partnerships were emphasized. When Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Kimiya Yui uploaded pictures of his training in the Dream Chaser simulator, it was a clear signal that crew readiness is being advanced. They also praised Oita Airport in Japan as a potential landing site and celebrated winning the Japan Open Innovation Prize. For this, they emphasized compatibility with runways worldwide. Collaborations with the University of Alabama for payloads and with Merck for biopharma experiments on board underline the focus on payloads. Crew 10 astronauts trained on the Dream Chaser, and with the announcement of Sierra Space Defense, including one. $5 billion in contracts since 2023 for satellite production. In United States national security, it became clear that resources are widely distributed. The launch was postponed to the end of 2026 with a new focus on a free flyer mission instead of docking. They had just celebrated the completion of tests on electronics, electromagnetic interference, and towing tests in Florida, where the vehicle was tested in high-speed landing trials with a truck. Why all the delays? Sierra Space is not just Dream Chaser, they're building an entire empire. In addition to the spaceplane, they're developing the Life Habitat, an inflatable space station module, which they tested to its limits in June 2025. The thing withstands 60 psi 4 times more than necessary. They've also partnered with Redwire for in-space manufacturing and with Spirit Aerosystems for more affordable shooting star modules. But how is Sierra Space doing financially? I'd say they're in a strong position. With $1.7 billion in investment since their founding and $3.4 billion in ongoing contracts. However, the shift to defense projects is draining resources, for example, in the production of 30 satellites for the military. The contract change with National Aeronautics and Space Administration in September 2025 made the first mission a free flyer without docking, officially to create more flexibility. But probably because certification problems and delays with the Vulcan rocket due to ULA's Centaur stage are disrupting the schedule. Shall I play the devil's advocate? Is that a smart strategy, or does it just distract from the core mission? After all, the $1.5 billion defense business keeps the company solvent, and Dream Chaser benefits in the long run from the technology. As mentioned, the planned missions will begin with a free flyer demo in the fourth quarter of 2026, which does not require docking but serves as a proof of concept for cargo deliveries. The launch will take place on ULA's Vulcan Centaur from Cape Canaveral, with the wings folded inside a 5-meter fairing. Dream Chaser is compatible with other rockets like the Ariane 6 or the New Glenn from Blue Origin, and allows runway landings worldwide. Like Aita in Japan and Huntsville in the USA or even Midland. The ESA will support their projects through at least 2026. And so will commercial stations, like Fast Haven or Axiom, who plan commercial low Earth orbit stations with NASA. It carries up to 3.5 tons and about 1.7 tons back, with a soft landing for sensitive pilots like Merck's cancer research. What makes Dream Chaser different from regular capsules? No splashdown like with Dragon or Orion. Instead, a lifting body design that glides like a plane and lands on runways. Softer G-forces of 1.5 G compared to over 4 G, no toxic propellants, and reusable up to 15 times. The wings allow precise maneuvers, and the shooting star modules burn up during re-entry for waste disposal. Currently, it is only certified for cargo, but the crew variant DC-200 passed the system requirement review in 2022. Manned flights are planned once the priorities are right. Astronauts may land like jets in the future. I have one more point about the shooting star modules. While they're working hard here to develop a reusable system, they've designed an essential part of the architecture in such a way that it has to be thrown away and rebuilt each time. The part is called a cargo module, but in fact it's also a propulsion or service module. So they're throwing away more than just a cargo module, which sounds like just an empty shell. So let me ask you this. Is your car reusable if after every drive your engine bursts into flames and you have to replace it? Exactly. I 3D printed the Dream Chaser and the cargo module to give you a sense of how the two compare in size. The cargo module makes up about a third of the size, and it contains the propulsion system. It's true that Sierra Space is quite an innovative company, but you can tell that it comes from the ranks of the established defense contractors, where short-term profits are a top priority. I would say they are the perfect crossover or hybrid from both worlds. To me, that smells like the fear that you would have to produce too little if you built something fully reusable, which to me is complete nonsense and sounds short-sighted. You can't tell me they couldn't have made the Dream Chaser 1 meter longer and fit everything that's in the service module in there so you don't have to throw away engines every time. It's also true that this way you get rid of the space station's trash, but there are other ways to solve that. I'm not a fan of the shooting star at all, and this romanticized name shooting star translates to falling star. But let's be honest, what it actually is an expensive, disposable, high-tech service module. The Dream Chaser may be delayed, but with defense money, national aeronautics and space administration partnerships, and tests in the bag, 2026 could be the breakthrough year. A space plane that gently brings cargo back and maybe soon cruise. I'm not asking if it will be the next space shuttle, because we don't need a spacecraft that ties up enormous resources and costs 14 lives. However, you can certainly ask whether Dream Chaser has a future or is just a dream. And if you also want early access to our videos, you'll find all the information about it below in the video description. My name is Servan, and this was Mars Chronicles. Thanks for tuning in. Per aspera ad astra.